walah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we have now reached the 9th bab of, or rather the 10th, alhamdulillah, how time flies. The 10th bab of the first introduction of Ibn Juzay's Tafsir. And this one concerns al-fasaha wal-balagha wa adawat al-bayan, right? So these are terms which are very important in to every Arabic language student. Of course, we were studying Arabic. We study something called al-fusha, which is sort of gathering the most eloquent forms of Arabic speech from al-lughat al-fasiha. And every speaker wants to be able to speak clearly, eloquently. Okay, so there's a clarity of speech, and then there is how you are communicating effectively to the listener, right? So using the different modes of speech. And that applies to any language. In any language, you want to be clear, you want to be understood, you want your words to be respectable at the right level, and you also want them to have an effect on the listener. So there are all sorts of figures of speech. There are expressions, idioms that we use. And actually what could be useful if any of you are thinking about writing a textbook in Balagha sometime, is to draw examples from English speech if you're writing in English, or whatever language you're writing it in. Try to find equivalents or things that are close to the point that's being made in whichever language you're writing, right? Because a lot of the things that we say about the Arabic language, and we focus on them as the khasa'is, the lughat al-Arabiya. And I'm not denying here that the Arabic language has khasa'is. It's just that many things that we sort of focus in on, that this is unique to the Arabic language, it's not necessarily unique. Arabic might have particular ways of doing it. It might be particularly good and flexible in certain things. It might be very rich in certain regards. But that doesn't mean that other languages should be depreciated in that kind of context. I actually, to be honest, find it rather tedious when people make this point about Arabic is a rich language and other languages are poor or impoverished. Most recently, when I was at a translation conference and award, there was, I was traveling in a minibus with a bunch of other translators and linguists, and they were all having this conversation about Arabic as a rich language and English is a poor language. I was like, well, to be honest, if you are poor in the other language, then okay, it's poor for you. But if somebody has gathered enough of those other languages, they will find them rich. Try telling the poets of the English language that English is poor. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't compute. Maybe in specific ways, we could say Arabic has a certain richness in this particular department, which outdoes all other languages. Even when you're going to say that, you have to sort of know about all other languages in order to comment on other languages. You can't really compare if you only have an awareness of one of them. And if you've only studied one of them, like if you study Arabic and through the technical means, and you study as nahw and sarf and balagha and adab, and maybe you're a native speaker of English, but you didn't study these things systematically, so you might not appreciate just what your own language actually holds. But anyway, the Arabic language is an incredibly rich language. There's no doubt about that. It's just that, yeah, it's kind of a cop-out to me when you say that, okay, translation to other languages is very difficult or even impossible because Arabic is so rich and no other language can compare or compete. The problem arises from just the nature of translation in general, right? There's always going to be loss in the process of translation. You can't carry everything over. But there are particular things embedded in the logic of the Arabic language, which may be particularly hard to transfer to other languages. But there may be other languages that can do a better job of capturing those things in Arabic, such as those languages that are closer to Arabic, those languages that carry Arabic words into them, let's say like Urdu, for example, or Turkish, or There are languages where, and Persian as well, where Arabic words enter into them and vice versa. So it's not that hard to then use basically the same word in the target language. If you're going to English, you've got a very different trajectory, history, nature of the language. So it's not surprising that we struggle. And we need to use more words in English to convey something that might be very concisely, expressed in one word in Arabic. So, yeah, so we want to appreciate the nature of the Arabic language, the sources of the Arabic language, and with that, you have this kind of question that's gone back, some debate that's happened in our own tradition surrounding whether Arabic is like the origin of all languages or not. And I don't know how popular the view is that Arabic is the origin of all languages, but you could draw that conclusion from certain things, and the Quran is telling us about Adam alayhi salam and the conversations that took place there. If you take the that certain face value reading of the Quran, then you're like, okay, Adam is speaking Arabic. But of course, that's not a very sustainable thing to say that all of the prophets then were speaking Arabic because they speak Arabic in the Quran. However, there is, a genuine belief amongst people that Arabic, goes back before other languages branch off from it. Or separate from that point, but related, is just the idea that Arabic has been created sort of out of nothing, is a divinely inspired language. And then related to that is certain other theological thoughts and ideas, which is that Arabic is a language of Jannah, right? So Ibn Hazm, rahimahullah, is the one that comes to mind who has particularly taken aim at some of these kind of ideas. Imam al-Razi also in the Great Exegesis, he does, in volume 1, which I translated, he does discuss this mas'ala a little bit, the difference of view between those who see language, or Arabic language in particular, as kind of tawqifiyya, right, so divinely mandated, versus those who see it as purely a matter of istilah. And if I recall, Imam Razi sort of doesn't show a clear siding with one view or the other. But certainly from the perspective of historical linguistics, and that's not my field, but you could ask the people in that field, the idea that Arabic is the oldest of all languages doesn't compute at all. The idea that it's like an orphan or created ex nihilo from nothing and without any antecedents and precedents also doesn't make any sense in terms of scholarship and so on. As for whether it's language of Jannah, that's fine. I mean, you can stick with that if you want. It's not a problem. There's no problem with that position. But it's just the whole sort of package deal of seeing Arabic as something which doesn't have human. It's not a human growth. It's not a matter of natural speech, right? But when you see it as natural speech, you realize that actually human beings have been speaking in all different cultures, and there's a lot of similarity that underlies the way that people express things. Right? So many of the things that we have here as figures of speech and expressions of Arabic, again, you're going to hear sometimes people say, see, Arabic has something very special. It is called taqdeem wa ta'khir, as if other languages don't always also have, reversing of word order in certain circumstances. So, it's learning the fancy terms in Arabic is quite crucial to studying the Quran effectively. Okay, but you actually appreciate that more when you realize, this works because the human mind works in a certain way and is affected by speech in certain ways, right? A lot of the things, I studied a little bit of linguistics in university. So we had, what's the sort of subject matter here? There was, I remember a particular lesson where we were looking at the speech acts, right? So it was very much along the lines of what we study in Balagha as khabar versus insha. And then it was various, purposes of the khabar. So when you say things, what various types of purposes could you be trying to get at beyond just informing someone, right? So I remember in Balagha, we talk about it as, al-fa'ida wa lazim al-fa'ida, and then all sorts of aghrad balaghiyya behind saying certain things. Right, so that's actually, as far as I understand in Western linguistics, a fairly modern discussion, right? And in our Balagha books, it's been going on for a very long time. So it's linguistics, it's what it is. And yes, it's within the logic of the Arabic language, but we can understand it, you know, in a sort of broader way as well. And it helps you to appreciate more about your own language as well, right? If you're a native English speaker, for example, to appreciate actually how your own language works. That's something that I personally have found very valuable in studying Arabic balagha. Yeah. So I would say though that, you know, there are certain things about the Arabic language which you do sometimes, like, it takes your breath away, the sort of extent to which is very logical, the extent to which it seems as if it's been designed, right? And of course, in some sense, it's designed because humans have also designed how they speak, and then later on, it's been codified in certain ways, which increases that picture of design. But the logic sometimes of how certain root letters revolve around each other and carry meanings, it can be quite baffling. There's a particular dictionary which is by Muhammad Hassan Jabal, an Azhari scholar. It is called Al-Mu'jam Al-Ishtiqaqi Al-Mu'assal li Alfaz Al-Quran Al-Kareem. So this particular dictionary is based on the idea that you know, the roots of Arabic words, you know, are made up of obviously generally 3 letters. Okay, and the most significant of a root is the first 2 sahih letters. So if you have a root like jalasa, jim and lam will be what he'll call al-fasl al-mu'jami, right? Jim and lam. So then all the letters with jim and lam have a relationship with each other, right? They share quite a lot in terms of meaning. If you know, the first 2 letters are not both sahih, meaning to say one of them is a weak letter, like let's say waqafa, then we just ignore the waw, and the fasl mu'jami is qaf and fa. Okay, so that's what he calls al-fasl mu'jami. And then he draws certain connections between those that share the fasl mu'jami, these 2 out of the root. And he also draws connection between those that even share 1 letter, because then he finds that each letter has got a certain quality, which almost you can mathematically compute what that root is going to mean based on the combination of letters. Now, he's done a vast, you know, his work is undoubtedly actually a hugely valuable dictionary of Arabic etymology and Quranic meanings. Whether his theory stands up to scrutiny under, you know, various linguistic theories is another question. But I, you know, what I can do is dismiss it because it works in a great number of occasions, right? There are sometimes you feel, okay, this example might be a bit strained, or that one might be strained, but a lot of times it really works. I haven't looked so much into, you know, the impact of individual letters that he argues, but I do look at his idea about what is sort of at the core of each meaning. And I know that he's drawing that from his ideas about the letters. So, okay, so sometimes it is tempting to have this sort of like divinely created view of Arabic language, but we shouldn't separate that from understanding it as a human phenomenon as well. Okay, question. Does the often made claim to the khasa'is of Arabic come from any textual evidence? Yeah, there may be some ahadith and statements of the Salaf and so on that supports that kind of point of view, and that all has to be you know, discussed comprehensively and within a general realistic overview, right? So what the revelation of the Quran did was draw attention to the importance of language and the centrality of language as a means of getting the communication across, right? The wahi is being conveyed in words. And then the Muslims very quickly rose to the challenge of preserving their language. I mean the Arabic language, you know, the first recipients were the Arabs, of course. And of course, the non-Arabs participated in this big project in a big way, such that the major compilers of the dictionaries and so on are typically from the Ajam, right? But what I mean is that the Muslims saw the importance of preserving the Arabic language, and that is why you had the development of the science of Nahu and Sarf, right? So they weren't codifying these things before the Quran. With the Quran came the urgency to preserve the meanings of words, which is where we get dictionaries from, and to preserve the understanding of structures and grammar, which is where Nahu comes from, and then the understanding of how the effectiveness of that communication is evaluated. Why? Because this balagha discussion that we're having here has an intimate relationship with the discussion of i'jaz al-Quran, right? So the inimitability or the challenge of the Quran or the miraculous nature of the Quran. Now, I don't want to get too sidetracked on trying to discuss historical things, but just to give you a quick idea. Of course, we understand that the first hearers of the Quran were stunned by it and unable to meet the challenge of imitating it. And then we can ask the question, so why were they unable to? So when we look at it a little bit later, we just look back and say, right, why did the first hearers of the Quran just say, oh, it's sihr, or it's qawlu kahin, or so? At first they just were flummoxed, right? They didn't just say Muhammad ﷺ is saying that, right? Because they knew that these words coming from him are somehow not the kind of thing that he should be expected to say, right? And also particularly him, like he's not a great poet amongst us. How is he suddenly coming out with something which doesn't even fit into what we understand poetry to be, right? We're familiar with it, like we can understand what it's saying, and yet it's saying things in a completely different way. It's not poetry, but it's got bits of what we understand poetry to be, and yet it's not fitting in with our conventions, right? So that's what i'jaz means in the first place, and like making it impossible for anyone to overcome it, or to meet the challenge as the Quran presented the challenge in several verses, to bring the like of it, or to bring 10 surahs, or to bring one surah of its like. So why? Now, there was some debate between theologians about this, and there was a point of view that maybe it was just a divine diversion. This is called as-sarfa. Right? So I think it was Mu'tazila. Was it the Mu'tazila? But there was a view certainly among some of the Mu'tazila, because I'm going to show you later how important the Mu'tazila became in the opposite side of this equation. But they had the view that, basically, people should be able to come up with something, because the Quran is just made up of words, as you can see it. It's words, structures. What's to stop someone really eloquent putting something together that meets that challenge, that sounds like it? Okay, so it's like the explanation then had to be, well, theoretically it's possible, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevented them from being able to do so, just like by a divine act. Okay, so just like blocking them from being able to do it. A bit like how Abu Lahab, could have responded to Surah Al-Lahab by saying, okay, I've become a Muslim now. What happened to that surah that was slamming me and said I'm going to enter hellfire? In a sense, he could have done that, but Allah Azza wa Jal diverted him from doing that. Or you can just put it in another way, that his arrogance was too much to ever be able to do that. In any case, this view of the sarfa became very unpopular and became overcome and replaced really by, I guess, I don't know the full details of the history, but the really influential name in this regard is Abdul Qahir al-Jurjani, because he's written books which became actually the basis of ilm al-balagha as we have it now. And one of those is called Dala'il al-I'jaz. Dala'il al-I'jaz. So like the indicators of inimitability, right? And that is a book of balagha. So what this established and then became the way of understanding things really is that it was the Quran's way of expression. It's its words and its meanings, and the way that words and meanings are knitted together, which Abdul Qahir called al-Nazm, which is the basis for the i'jaz of the Quran, right? So it's not the case that well, anyone could have really said something like the Quran, but in theory, but God prevented them doing so. Rather, they cannot, because the Quran has such balagha. So in order to be able to describe that balagha, is necessary to develop a science in which you actually, you have these expressions and you have these tools and you have these modes of measurement. And that allows you then to also be more, baligh in your own speech. But first and foremost, this was about trying to codify something that was, before that, just understood by the Arabs, right? Understood by the speakers of the language, the poets and the khutaba and the udaba of the Jahiliyyah, right? So a wee question came up: does saj'a exist in other forms in the Quran? Yes, saj'a exists in poetry, and sometimes even in nathar and khataba, right? A comment here: Mustafa Rafi'i holds that Qurayshi Arabic acquired its strength through the social linguistic process of its interaction. Yes, with other certain dialects. Yes, yeah, and that. I think that's a well-respected point of view. I think that's an accepted point of view. So yeah, but the Arabic language then is composed of all these different dialects, which then that's why when we said al-Fusha is not one dialect, right? Al-Fusha becomes, a description for just like something which became an amalgamation, not the Qurayshi dialect itself, but an amalgamation of things which are fasih from different dialects, right? Right. So, so then it's important then to know something about balagha in order to appreciate the way that the Quran is expressed. You are not a Jahili Arab, right? I think I can say with some certainty. You are not a Jahili Arab man or woman. So when you hear the Quran, you're not hearing it with that type of ma'arif. You're not hearing it from that, with that kind of background, which lets you appreciate the way that the Quran is speaking, right? So then you need the tools, just like we need the tools of Arabic lexicon. If we don't know the meanings of words, we need the tools of Arabic grammar, because we are not, that's not our saliqa. It's not what we have been dyed in the wool with these things. So same with balagha, right? Now, let's listen to the chapter and let's try to get through what we get through بإذن الله.
يقول رحمه الله: الباب العاشر في الفصاحة والبلاغة وأدوات البيان. أما الفصاحة فلها 5 شروط. الأول أن تكون الألفاظ عربية، لا مما أحدثه المولدون ولا مما غلطت فيه العامة. الثاني أن تكون من الألفاظ المستعملة، لا من الوحشية المستثقلة. الثالث أن تكون العبارة واقعة على المعنى موفية له، لا قاصرة عنه. الرابع أن تكون العبارة سهلة سالمة من التقعير. الخامس أن يكون الكلام سالما من الحشو الذي لا يحتاج إليه. وأما
Okay, so here when he's talking about fasaha, he's talking in very general terms. He's not talking about, assessing fasahat al-Quran or something like that. Just fasaha, something being fasih. And then he's going to talk about something being baligh, right? So going from fasaha to balagha. Right? So eloquence in general in Arabic speech is based on not violating any of these 5 things. First, the words must be pure Arabic. Okay. No, that shouldn't then go against the idea that things become Arabic over time. But like there's an understanding that if things became, entered the language when people were, when Arabic speakers were at their best, right? So, especially what they call zaman al-istishhad, right? So, in terms of what we use to understand the Quran, we need speech and examples of poetry from the early periods that precede the revelation of the Quran, on the one hand, or that maybe after that, but still within the time when people's speech was considered to be at its best, right? And they say before too much mixing happened with all the other and then the standard of Arabic, it's not what it once was, So al-muwalladun, I guess you could say neologists, but I think they're sort of over technicalizing this word, because al-muwalladun just means like later people who might have coined things. So they've got, so a neologism is a newly coined word. So then they want to say neologist is someone who coins the word later on, right? Or mistakes made by the masses. So yeah, sometimes we've got the notion of corruption in language, which is to say when people just talk a certain way. It happens a lot in every language. People talk and then they sort of change things a little bit in the way they pronounce it, and then that becomes the understood way, and people forgot how it was supposed to be, right? Secondly, that they be words that people use, right? Not something that is like found from the depths of a book or the bottom of a closet. Okay. لا من الوحشية المستثقلة. So wahshiyya, like beastly, but wahsha is unfamiliarity, right? Third, the text must reflect the meaning completely and not fall short in expressing it. Okay. So for a speech to be fasih, right, a sentence to be fasih, fasiha, it would be that the meaning, it gets the meaning across, right? That's as simple as that. Fourth, the text must be simple and free from complexity. I mean, so of course there's different levels of that, but the point is like unnecessarily complex. Also, like, I think that here when he's talking about complexities, he may also be talking about like in matters of pronunciation, right? So al-wahshiyya al-mustathqala is more to do with pronunciation, I suppose. Because part of it is like if the letters are, you know, difficult letters, or the combination of letters are awkward, too much repetition of a letter, you know, it's hard to pronounce it, right? Like in a Balagha textbook, some of you have read this one where he says, you know, ما لكم تكأتم علي كتكاتوكي, what is it again? I can't even remember. كتكاكوئكم على ذي جنة افرنقعوا عني, right? You might remember how it is. But the whole point is that that's difficult to remember because it's so awkward. Too many kafs and tas and hamzas, right? So I adapted this like when my children are saying, Daddy, Daddy. I was, ما لكم تدادأتم علي كتدادؤكم على ذي جنة. Fourth, the text must be simple and free from complexities. Fifth, the words must be free from and should not require explanatory insertions. Okay, so this is not quite right. أن يكون الكلام سالما من الحشو الذي لا يحتاج إليه. So I feel like Ibn Juzayy is playing with us a little bit here, honestly speaking, right? So al-hashu would be any unnecessary words. So he could have just stopped here and said أن يكون الكلام سالما من الحشو. But then it's like الذي لا يحتاج إليه. So I feel like he did that on purpose, almost to illustrate it. And then when I thought that, I thought I'll go back and see if he's done the same thing in the other points, right? سالمة من التقعير. I mean, so some of the manuscripts apparently have ta'qeed. And ta'qeed is probably the word that I, you know, in the books of Balagha that I read, they would say saliman min ta'qeed, right? Complication. Taq'ir, I suppose, means the same thing, but then, like, what it's not so clear to me. So maybe that's the point, that he's done an ibara which is not so sahla, so that we would notice the illustration. But then this is very muwaffiya lil ma'na. I don't think I can complain about this third one. Al-fadh musta'mala. I mean, unless maybe wahshiyya is not a word that people use, but anyway, I can't say that. I can't complain about that one either. And then I was looking for a muwallad word in here in the Arabic. Maybe the word muwallad is muwallad. Wouldn't that be nice? Anyway, I'm someone who likes wordplay, so like I appreciate it if an author plays with you a little bit like this. So al-hashu, the words must be free from. So it's not and should not require explanatory insertions. Like say excessive or redundant words. Which there is no need for. But you see, that is redundant, isn't it? So I think I'm just going to end the sentence there. Superfluous, yeah, superfluous is a good. Yeah, I think that's probably even better than redundant. Let's just play with just play a little bit. Superfluous and redundant words. Okay, so that's in terms of fasaha, and then he talks about balagha. Now, what's interesting here? No, I didn't get a chance to read Sheikh Tayyar's sharh. I have it here because we might want to draw from some examples. It's quite hard to follow this particular chapter without examples. But I noticed that he's talking about balagha, and then he talks about al-bayan. The word al-bayan comes here, and the word al-badi' comes here. And it so happens that balagha, as it's now understood and categorized, has three main areas, which is ilm al-bayan, ilm al-ma'ani, and ilm al-badi', right? But I think that for the most part, he's not using these words in those particular ways according to these three sub-sciences of balagha. But when he's talking about adawat al-bayan, I think he should be broadly understood as referring to asalib al-arabiyya, general asalib, general styles of speech, figures of speech, some of which come under majaz, and some of which come under other things. Some of the things in this list of 22 things come under what is called badi', right? So it's between bayan and badi', and some things that might be outside of that category. But the list has a certain flavor of randomness to it, in my personal view. But what it seems he's done is that as he's working through his tafsir, he's just made a note whenever there's something that he wanted to draw attention to, and then he's compiled those together, and it's come to 22 items, right? So let's listen to what he says.
فهي سياق الكلام على حسب ما يقتضيه الحال والمقام من الإيجاز والإطناب ومن التهويل والتعظيم والتحقير ومن التصريح والكناية والإشارة وشبه ذلك بحيث يهز النفوس ويؤثر في القلوب ويقود السامع إلى المراد أو يكاد. وأما أدوات البيان فهي صناعة البديع، وهي تزين الكلام كما يزين العلم الثوب. وقد وجدنا في القرآن منها 22 نوعا، ونبهنا على كل نوع في المواضع التي وقع فيها من القرآن، ونذكر هنا أسماءها ونبين معانيها.
Okay, so it's not 23 but 22, and there are 22 in the list. So balagha is about getting the speech right according to the circumstance, right? So it's not just being fasih in and of itself, but then being baligh is to do with saying the right thing in the right time, to the right person, in the right circumstance, adapting your speech according to the needs of the communication that is intended to happen, right? So is the delivering speech, or let's say is to deliver speech according to the demands of the circumstance and the situation. So that might be in terms of brevity and verbosity, right? So that would be, these are an opposite pair, right? So sometimes it is appropriate to be more verbose and to, to say more words, to talk more at length. And sometimes it is more appropriate to be brief, right? Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah Daraz, rahimahullah, another great Azhari scholar, he has this view in his book, Naba'ul Azim. He takes an unusual view that ijaz is actually the thing that is always the way of the Quran. And this is always the virtue of the Quran, is to be, is for there to be conciseness of expression. But most of the scholars just understand that ijaz and itnab are both virtues in the right place. Okay, وَمِنَ التَّهْوِيلِ وَالتَّعْظِيمِ وَالتَّحْقِيرِ. Okay, so sometimes, so we want to sort of break these up in the translation, right? So that's two. Talking about things in the appropriate tone, this would be, isn't it? So sometimes you're talking about things So what's this moderation? So they've written tahdeel. There could be an issue of the what do you call it, editions. We have a tahweel, which makes it join with the context of tahweel and ta'zeem, right? So tahweel is to sort of talk something up in terms of the horrors of the Day of Judgment or something. It's tahweel. If you understood this to be connected to the brevity and verbosity, then even tahdeel, I don't know if that means moderation in reality. Ta'deel, I don't know what tahdeel would mean. Let's have a look. That's what I thought. It's the cooing of a pigeon. But I thought, is there some other meaning? I don't know how they've got to this tahdeel thing, right? So this should be tahweel. Also, like in our text, you can see that it's got wamin. So he's separating that. Min al-ijazi wal-itnab, wa min al-tahwili wal-ta'zim wal-tahqir. That's a second group of things, right? Contrasting expressions, right? So I don't necessarily have a word coming to my mind for tahwil right now. Maybe something comes to your mind. Tahwil is when Allah Azza wa Jalla is talking about, how severe something is. Okay, so it's similar to ta'zeem, but ta'zeem could be sounding a bit more positive and tahwil a bit more negative, although they can be interchanged a bit. Right? Anyway, I've highlighted it so it can be filled in. And degradation, tahqir, right? And then you've got التصريح والكناية. So kinaya as metonymy is all right, but you see here, he's talking about saying something explicitly or implicitly. So kinaya can also mean something else, which is euphemism. Not always, but in this context, when you say tasrih versus kinaya, sometimes it is to use a euphemistic expression. Okay, wal ishara, that might connect to it. التصريح والكناية والإشارة, and allusion, indication, إشارة. And so on. I mean, I'm generally okay with etc., but I just, for the purpose of. Now he says here, بحيث يهز النفوس ويؤثر في القلوب ويقود السامع إلى المراد أو يكاد. So the أو يكاد, what I understand that he's getting at is, you cannot always guarantee the results, however baligh you may be. You can say things in the best way, but you're not necessarily going to make the person understand or be affected, right? But you've done your part, so you'll have been on the verge of convincing them, even if they don't become convinced. Other than that, I'm not sure what Aw Yakad is doing here. I would not say touch the hearts and drive listen to the intended meaning or close to it, because that's not baligh. If you're not actually saying the right meaning, then there's no balagha actually there. So not intended meaning or near it. That's what I'm disagreeing with. His point is that you would yaqud أو takadu and taqud, right? So you almost managed to get them to be convinced. It's not that you were close to the meaning or you got them close to the meaning. It's just that you may not have actually taken them there. You may not actually have the effect on the person, because that's beyond the power that you have as the baligh, right? Sound. Why is someone saying sound? Something happened to the sound? Okay. So then he goes into adawatul bayan.
النوع الأول المجاز، وهو اللفظ المستعمل في غير ما وضع له لعلاقة بينهما، وهو
So majaz here, under majaz, so under the usual categories in modern Balagha books, tashbih actually would be classed outside of majaz, right? So tashbih is one thing, and then you have got isti'ara, and isti'ara is considered a form of majaz. So I'm just drawing attention to that, just to say that, you know, he might use certain categories which, you know, he and maybe other scholars put it in this certain way. It might be slightly different from how you find in other books, or what became, you know, mustaqir. Yeah, I think Abdurrahman, you're the only one who's not getting sound, because nobody else has complained yet. So there are different categories, and you know, we just basically want to get the whole idea of the various things that he's pointing towards, not worrying about how they're classed or what they're classed under, right? So المجاز هو اللفظ المستعمل في غير ما وضع له. So ما وضع له is the thing that is coined for, right? So it's its primary usage. It is the literal usage also, right? So that word may have, even from the beginning, have secondary usages, right? But there is some connection between that literal meaning and then these other various usages, right? So we often contrast between haqiqa and majaz, right? So majaz is something which is embedded in the way that we use language, right? It's embedded in the way, any language. It's not really, I just don't think it's possible for anyone to live a completely literal life, okay? Almost every sentence that you speak will contain some measure of majaz in it, okay? I mean, I didn't do it on purpose, but like when you speak and then you go back one sentence and look at the sentence, I mean, there's so many types of majaz in what I just said. I said it will contain some measure of majaz, okay? So now I'm doing isti'ara with some kind of cup or a measuring thing. And I said, just go back to the previous sentence. You know, I'm talking about language as if you can walk back, you know, one sentence. And then I said, let's look at the types of expression of what I just said. So I'm not, there's nothing to look at here, but I'm asking you to look at something which is not seen, which is speech, you know, which you've just heard. So even the sentences that I've said since then are just full of majazi things. Once you realize that, you know, your mind is blown, you know, blow the lid open on language, right? There you go, lots of expressions. And I sometimes say we use majazi expressions around the clock, right? We use them around the clock. Again, majazi expression. It's just very natural. We shouldn't find it like to be very strange. If the Quran is revealed in the Arabic language, then we should expect it to contain the features of the Arabic language. And if majaz, as it's then defined, right, by the scholars of this sha'n, if majaz is one of those features which is indispensable to the Arabic language and the modes of Arabic speech, then for sure the Quran will contain it, right? Ibn Juzayy notes a little bit later on that there, you know, he says, we'll read it in a minute, okay? But there are some people who disputed the existence of majaz. Even so, they just have to find another way of acknowledging the same realities, okay? And it doesn't matter too much what you call it. I mean, it has implications. It has, you know, there's a big issue of debate and stuff that emerged, in particular from Ibn Taymiyyah and his case against majaz. But that stems back to certain theological debates about the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in any case, like for the most part, the scholars were very comfortable with the fact that there's majaz, okay? And it wasn't seen as being like akhul kadhib, al-majazu akhul kadhib, as some have said. It's like the brother of, you know, that's the kind of majaz in itself, right? Majaz is the brother of falsehood and lying, okay? Because it's dishonest. Like we should expect, especially in the speech of Allah, everything to be straight and true, okay? But things can be true, but there's maybe a question about what you understand by the nature of true speech, right? Anyway, there is always some connection between the haqiqi meaning and the majazi meaning, right? Or between the zahir of the speech and what is supposed to be understood beneath the surface, right? Something other than the zahir. So yes, for the most part, your default is to start with the haqiqah and to start with the zahir. And if that makes sense, then you have no reason to depart from it. Okay. Otherwise, you get a kind of chaotic methodology whereby you're just always reading, indirect things in speech, and you're ignoring the plain sense that the speaker probably intended, right? But a lot of the time, just from common sense, you realize, the person didn't mean it in the most literal way. They might have meant something majazi, even if it's just a slight shift from the literal meaning, right? It doesn't have to be something completely separate, just something, right? Take your, a common example of this, say, what is it? إطلاق اسم الكل على البعض, right? So when it is said that جعلوا أصابعهم في آذانهم, okay, both in Surah Al-Baqarah, the ones who are avoiding the thunderclaps, and the ones in Surah Nuh who are don't want to listen to his message, right? They place their fingers in their ears, and the ulama of balagha say, well, of course they didn't place their whole fingers in their ears, because that would be like, excuse me, don't get too scared, this is a trick, okay? Right, all the way in. جعلوا أصابعهم, this is really, really sore. في آذانهم. No, of course, جعلوا أناملهم, right? Just their fingertips, they can go in their ears, that's all can go in. Thing is that when you hear جعلوا أصابعهم في آذانهم, is anyone really taking it so literally? Okay, taking things too literally and not being able to appreciate non-literal speech is considered a kind of learning difficulty, right? You may know what I'm talking about. If you're on the spectrum or whatever, you're not able to appreciate the nuances of speech, and people sometimes take everything literally, and you have to be careful. I once had a visit of children from one of the special support schools in my area to the masjid, and I was trying to give them a little introduction to the masjid, and it was pointed out to me by the teacher that be careful about saying things. They're going to take everything you say literally. So, and it was very difficult then to not say things which are literally got some problematic meanings. If I just say, yeah, just hop on over here, right? It didn't happen, but if I said just hop over here, I just mean let's go quickly over here. They might think that I'm saying to hop, right? So we have to have a certain amount of just a shared understanding of how the language works. That's how majaz works. So جعلوا أصابعهم في آذانهم. I don't think anyone's going to really understand that they place their entire fingers in the ears. The expression is clear. It doesn't have to be overanalyzed. But insofar as we're going to overanalyze it, because we are studying balagha, then it's إطلاق الكل بمعنى البعض, right? So only الجزء, right? So a part is intended, and we're using the word for the whole thing, right? And that's perfectly valid to say I place my finger in my ear. As long as any part of the finger goes in, I've spoken the truth, right? So no one's going to say كذبت, right? It's just it's sidq, but there's some flexibility in speech, right? Which we call majaz, right? So إطلاق الكل وإرادة الجزء. So then you could further explore, and this is what I think is important when we do kind of ta'wil, or when we're involved in saying that this is a majazi meaning, that at the same time we should appreciate why it was actually expressed in the way that it was. So if Allah Azza wa Jal has used the word asabi'ahum, are we saying that it means anamilahum? In which case, if we're saying it means anamilahum, then why not just say, well, okay, Allah Azza wa Jal could have said anamilahum. Am I suggesting that anamilahum is better? Like it's clearer? It is superior to actually what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said? You see how we get into a very problematic position if we were to follow that to its illogical conclusion. So instead we say, look, that's the beauty of the majaz. The beauty of the expression is it's talking as if they shoved their entire finger in their ear. Nobody really thinks that they did, but it just means that they were so stubborn, they're shoving it right in. So if they could have got their whole finger in their ear, they would have done that, right? So that's the beauty of majaz, right? If you try to just use a literal expression, you lose so much of the way that language conveys meaning, right? And the way that we appreciate ideas based on a shared linguistic background, a shared set of idiom. Right. Okay. Intimidate for tahweel. Not quite. You're getting it's in the right zone. Okay, so let's hear this list of majaz.
10 نوعا: التشبيه والاستعارة والزيادة والنقصان، وتسمية المجاور باسم مجاوره، والملابس باسم ملابسه، وإطلاق اسم الكل على البعض وعكسه، وتسمية السبب باسم المسبب وعكسه، والتسمية باعتبار ما يستقبل، والتسمية باعتبار ما مضى، وفي هذا خلاف هل هو حقيقة أو مجاز. واتفق أكثر أهل علوم اللسان وأهل الأصول على وقوع المجاز في القرآن، لأن القرآن نزل بلسان العرب وعادة فصحاء العرب استعمال المجاز، ولا وجه لمن منعه، لأن الواقع منه في القرآن أكثر من أن يحصى.
Okay, هذا فصل الخطاب في هذا الأمر. I don't need to say anything more about it. I mean, this list of things, of course, like it would be very extensive and lengthy. We tried to give examples of all of that. In terms of translating it, again, this needs a bit of time and attention to what they put here. So simile for tashbih is probably fine. Okay. So as I said, normally tashbih is not considered a form of majaz. Allegory, isti'ara, could be a word for it. Okay, ziyada and nuqsan, addition and omission. It needs to be clarified how this is majaz. What comes to mind is that we could look at what Sheikh Tayar says, but in terms of nuqsan, sometimes you miss out a certain, like a mudaf. So it's majaz because you have to sort of restore the mahdoof in order for it to be literally correct. Okay, let's see if he's got a good example for us. And the ziyada, I'm not so sure why that would. Okay. Okay, so this is the first point. This is majaz here, but he's got some general points. Oh. Yeah, interesting. Tanbihat. Okay, I don't think this sharh is going to be immediately useful to us based on what I'm seeing here. So we'll come back. So naming something by something close to it, there may be a neater word for it or something, but so not tasmiyah, but tasmiyah. We shouldn't have double ya. Al-mujawir bismi mujawirihi. Containment. Not malabis, that's clothes, right? Al-mulabis, naming it by its clothes. Well, here's the thing. So if they understood it as malabis, then I think that's where they got this idea of containment, because because something is contained by its clothes. Okay, al-mulabis is something that's got like some relationship, right? There's some connection. As simple as that. They've got a fancy word here for itlaq ism al-kull ala al-ba'd, and its opposite. Okay, referring to a cause by what causes, what it causes. Tasmiyatu sabab bism al-musab. So musabbib is the same as sabab. So al-musabbab should be here. تسمية السبب باسم المسبب. And its opposite, referring to something by what it will become. تسمية باعتبار ما يستقبل, or تسمية باعتبار ما مضى. So a bunch of these then are, so we have basically, this is majaz aqli, I would say. Al-mujawir, majaz aqli is typically called. And then these are all examples of majaz mursal. Majaz mursal, as it appears to me. Okay. Okay, so then he goes on to kinaya. They've now called it allusion. They changed the translation, because before that they said kinaya was metonymy. And I said maybe the word euphemism. But kinaya in general, like as a balagha term, I think we had a bit of discussion in the group about how to understand this, because metonymy, there was maybe another, maybe majaz aqli is actually closer to metonymy. And then kinaya, somebody suggested a word. Was you, Muhammad? Maybe if you remember what you suggested, we can note it here. Is an implicit expression to something by that which it necessitates. ما يلازمه من غير تصريح. So, for example, if you say of someone, you know, he's tight-fisted, right? So I'm using an English example, right? And it corresponds to something in Arabic anyway. But let's say in English, we say someone is tight-fisted. I mean that person is stingy, right? So I'm saying that his fist is like tightly closed, but I'm not focusing on the fact of the matter. Like that may actually be literally true, but that's not the point. The point is ma yulazimuhu, which is that you're tight-fisted, so you're not going to let go of the coins that you've got in your hand to spend from it, right? So that's the idea of kinaya. Yeah, okay. التفات, okay.
النوع الثاني الكناية، وهي العبارة عن الشيء بما يلازمه من غير تصريح. الثالث الالتفات، وهو على 6 أنواع: خروج من التكلم إلى الخطاب أو الغيبة، وخروج من الخطاب إلى التكلم أو الغيبة، وخروج من الغيبة إلى التكلم أو الخطاب.
Okay. Okay, so periphrasis. I'm going to, I'll note it here just so that, you know, for further investigation. For further investigation. I definitely wouldn't call it allusion. It's just quite commonly it's rendered as metonymy, but there may be a question mark over that being very appropriate for it. Right, so iltifat, I mean, it's kind of well, it's, you can see now we're not talking about forms of majaz, right? We're talking here about all sorts of types of styles of speech in Arabic. And one of those is that in the midst of speech, you switch it up from first person to third person, or the reverse, and so on. So from first person to second or third, from second to first or third, and from third to first or second person. Right? So that's how we express that in English compared to takallum versus khitab and ghiba. Ghiba is haram. Because ghiba is haram, ghiba is okay.
الرابع التجريد، وهو ذكر شيء بعد اندراجه في لفظ عام متقدم، والقصد بالتجريد تعظيم المجرد ذكره أو تحقيره أو رفع الاحتمال.
Okay, so this is sometimes just called ذكر الخاص بعد العام.
الخامس الاعتراض، وهو إدراج كلام بين شيئين متلازمين كالخبر والمخبر عنه والصفة والموصوف والمعطوف والمعطوف عليه، أو إدخاله في أثناء كلام متصل والقصد به تأكيد الكلام الذي أدرج فيه.
Okay. So اعتراض could be of different types, but he's describing what he means here. So it's something that would definitely feel like an insertion or feel like an interjection. I think so. Interjection will be the better way of putting this because this corresponds better to. Although interjection also in English sometimes we just say hello. There's an interjection, right? But still, I think this is closer. It's an inserted sentence between connected sentences or two inseparable words. I mean, if you say they're inseparable, you've kind of made it impossible for i'tirad to exist, right? They're terms that both have to exist, yeah, but they could be separated by an i'tirad, but that's against the norm, right? And he says it's in order to emphasize the sentence into which the insertion has been made.
التجنيس، وهو اتفاق اللفظ مع اختلاف المعنى. ثم إن الاتفاق قد يكون في الحروف والصيغة، أو في الحروف خاصة، أو في أكثر الحروف لا في جميعها، أو في الخط لا في اللفظ، وهو تجنيس التصحيف.
Okay, so this is often just called, is also called jinas. Okay, and you have jinas tam, jinas naqis. Okay, and this is min al-badi'a, right? So this is not to do with meanings in reality. It's to do with, it's one of the things that makes speech beautiful is that you have some repetition of the word, the shape of the word, the letters of a word elsewhere in the same speech. It makes it more beautiful that there's a sort of connection between the words that are being said. Letters and scale, or just in letters, or most of the letters, not all, or in writing, not in pronunciation. So that would be, I guess, he's talking about where, you know, it would be, for example, al-khat here, and then you've got over here al-hadh. So that's the kha without the dot becomes ha. The ta with a dot becomes dha. So then there's a similarity to the I, but there isn't a similarity in pronunciation. I think he's talking about that kind of situation. And it's tasheef. Tasheef is negative when you're trying to, you know, make sense of manuscripts or editions where a word has been wrongly transcribed, you know, a letter has been changed or so on. Just because I like my example, if it's right. I'll check these things, don't worry. Would parenthesis work instead of interjection? Parenthesis is actually good for i'tirad in a lot of circumstances. You have like a sentence which appears, which is interrupting a general flow, and then we say this sentence لا محل لها من الإعراب واعتراض هي اعتراض. But here, because the way he's describing it as sort of inserting between almost like a mubtada and khabar, it seems stronger than a parenthesis. I will insert it here for further consideration. I wouldn't normally leave two words in the translation, but I'm doing that just as a way of give it some thought later beyond the immediacy of the dars.
السابع المطابقة، وهي ذكر الأشياء المتضادة كالسواد والبياض والحياة والموت والليل والنهار وشبه ذلك. الثامن المقابلة، وهي أن تجمع بين شيئين فصاعدا ثم تقابلها بأشياء أخرى.
Okay, so again, an aspect of badi'a. So just beauty in speech is if you mention these two things next to each other, it's just something that they consider beautiful, or we consider beautiful. It's a matter of life and death. It's a black and white, it's night and day. Just whether you just say them together or just in different parts of the sentence, where the mention of night is followed by the mention of day, and it just sort of makes a completeness, and it's nice in terms of how the feel of the sentence comes across, the effectiveness of it. So that's mutabaqa. And then if you've got like a more complex construction of, like, you've got A, B, C part of the sentence, and then you've got A prime, B prime, C prime, and the A prime is the opposite of A, and the B prime is the opposite of B, and C prime is the opposite of C. So you've got a more constructed form of mutabaqa. We call this muqabala, right?
التاسع المشاكلة، وهي أن تذكر الشيء بلفظ غيره لوقوعه في صحبته.
Being present nearby might be a bit weak here. So mushakala, I mean, we come across that in a number of examples where it has a theological implication. وَمَكَرُوا مَكَرَ اللَّهِ, right? We have a few examples of this which Ibn Juzayy talks about in the surahs we already read, where the word is not intended for God in its, for example, Allahu yastahzi'u bihim wa yamudduhum fi tughyanihim ya'mahun. The reason why God's action is described as istihza, even though there could be something, it's open to debate maybe, but there could be something about the word istihza which is not in itself befitting of describing the divine, or the word makr might not be fitting in and of itself to describe the divine, but it is obviously appropriate in that God has used it. But it becomes appropriate because it is to express the response to what they are doing, right? So they say إنما نحن مستهزئون الله يستهزئ بهم. Okay, ومكروا ومكر الله والله خير الماكرين. But then you understand that perfectly fine in context, but it might be distasteful to take that word and say, just then call your son Abdul Makir, right? Or Abdul Mustahzi. Certain things are fine in the context because of this aspect of mushakala, right? That's one way of explaining these instances. If you know anyone called Abdul Mustahzi, let me know. I'll send him a present.
العاشر الترديد، وهو رد أول الكلام على آخره، ويسمى في الشعر رد العجز على الصدر.
رد أول الكلام. Okay, so not necessarily the first word. No, رد أول الكلام على آخره. So it seems like they've got an understanding of it, which they may have taken from somewhere, but it's not what I understand from what he said. It's rather that you say something at the beginning of the speech and then you bring that back at the end, right? So it started with a mention of ilm and then Allahu aliman hakima. So you've got a connection between the start and the end. And this is raddul, not al-ajz, but al-ajuz al-sadr. So I don't think he's talking about starting the next thing with what ended the previous one. But I can look up the word tardeed and see how it's explained elsewhere.
11 لزوم ما لا يلزم، وهو أن تلتزم قبل حرف الروي حرفا آخر، وكذلك عند رؤوس الآيات.
So a bit later he talks about a saj'a. So I don't know why he didn't put the two things next to each other, but if we look down, تسجيع هو أن تكون كلمات الآية على روي حرف واحد. So like the pausal letter is always the same. So sajr is not actually exactly the same as rhyme. It's a bit different. It's really just that the last letter agrees. So then what I understand from this لزوم ما لا يلزم is that there's more than that. It's a repetition of a letter. We're not talking here about the end of the ayah in this case, right? So they're calling it assonance. They might be onto something, but assonance is to do with a vowel sound. As far as I understand, assonance is to do with vowels as opposed to alliteration. Maybe they want to say alliteration, because harfan akhar, I don't think he's talking about a vowel. They may be talking about alliteration. But it's kind of strange for the word alliteration to be described in Arabic as luzum ma la yalzam. So that's intriguing. I'd have to look more into it. Maybe the shuruh can help with this.
الثاني عشر القلب، وهو أن يكون الكلام يصح ابتداء قراءته من أوله وآخره نحو دعت، أو تعكس كلماته فيقدم المؤخر منها ويؤخر المقدم.
Okay. Oh, that's nice. So examples in English can be dad, like dad, or race car, which is spelled the same forwards and backwards. Of course, there's a couple of famous examples in the Quran, and these are more like curiosities, but again, they're from Badi'a rather than anything else, right? So, كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. So, كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ. If you take the letters kaf, lam, fa, ya, lam, kaf, and you reverse them, you get the same كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ. And that has a certain niceness as well, because كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ is almost like revolving around. And you know, you can argue that this is an intended part of the speech and the revelation. But رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ is the other famous example. These are not things that were just made up by like somebody in the 21st century. These have been written in our books like a long, long time ago. رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ sort of requires you to ignore the the waw at the start, because the ayah, Surah Al-Muddathir, is وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. So you have to ignore the first waw. So like it's a little bit certain amount of takalluf, but again, if all you're saying is, oh, that's really nice, that touched my heart, or that's fine. If you're going to build a whole set of theories on it, maybe not.
الثالث عشر التقسيم، وهو أن تقسم المذكور إلى أنواعه أو أجزائه.
Now, I don't know why they've got this ضبط of it in this تحقيق. They say الثالث وعشر. I think that the rule is you have to say الثالث عشر, right? And likewise for the others. And I pointed this out before and I checked it, and it was right. If anyone's got further information, do let us.
الرابع عشر التتميم، وهو أن تزيد في الكلام ما يوضحه أو يؤكده وإن كان مستقلا دون هذه الزيادة. الخامس عشر التكرار، وهو أن تضع الظاهر موضع المضمر فتكرر الكلمة على وجه التعظيم أو التهويل أو لمدح المذكور أو ذبه أو للبيان. السادس.
Okay, so a few things here. So I don't need to go into all the examples. Takrar in particular is important because sometimes people talk about takrar as something negative. So they say, you know, oh, we need to give an explanation that's not takrar. So takrar in itself, repetition, doesn't have to be seen as a bad thing or something that has to be explained away. As the Imam himself has said here, it has effects such as ta'lim, or the abuse intimidation, which somebody was suggesting for tahweed, praise or censure or for clarification. Emphasis in general is the sort of go-to thing that takrar is for.
10 التهكم، وهو إخراج الكلام عن مقتضاه استهزاء بالمخاطب أو بالمخبر عنه كذكر البشارة في موضع النذارة.
Okay. فبشرهم بعذاب أليم, right? that kind of thing. So the word bashirhum, it's like give them the good news of what? Of a painful torment. So that kind of thing. You know, there are a few places where our scholars have read that into it. And I think in my own readings, sometimes, you know, the readings and discussions I have with Ustad Norman Ali Khan as well, a lot of, I think we find more of that. If we find more of that than maybe has been, it's sort of, if you come to it looking for it, you can see more, right? But again, you have to square that with the adab towards the Quran, understanding why you are seeing something as quote unquote sarcastic. I mean, I say quote unquote because the word sarcastic doesn't really seem to fit so well what we're trying to say here. The point is that sometimes the context is one in which God is, you know, he's talking about the punishment, for example, and he's punishing them more with the words that he's using, talking about that punishment, right? There's irony. Look at that person in Surah Al-Humaza. وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ الَّذِي جَمَعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدَ يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالَهُ أَخْلَدَهُ. Somebody's counting and counting his wealth over and over. يَحْسَبُ, right? So he could have used the word يَظُنُّ, he thinks. But no, he used the word يَحْسَبُ, which is also like for doing a calculation, right? So he reckons, we could say in English, or he calculates, he's calculating that his wealth is going to make him live forever, right? And there's so much, this surah is filled with these kind of word choices which increase the irony, increase the sense of mocking of those who deserve the mocking, right? So there's a lot of scope for that in a literary reading of the Quran, literary and not literally.
السابع عشر اللف والنشر، وهو أن تلف في الذكر شيئين فأكثر ثم تذكر متعلقات بها، وفيه طريقتان: أن تبدأ في ذكر المتعلقات بالأول وأن تبدأ بالآخر.
Okay, so they've kind of they've pulled out some fancy terms here. We need to look into the idea, but it's laf and nashr is like you mentioned, A and B, and then you elaborate on A, then you elaborate on B, or you say A and B, and then you elaborate on B, and then elaborate on A. Not necessarily elaborate, but you say something more about it. So then that can create structures. And when they say chiasmus here, they're saying like a ring structure. Because if you talk about A, B, and then you talk about B, A, you've created a sort of mirror structure or a ring structure, which is a very popular field of exploration these days.
الثامن عشر الجمع، وهو أن تجمع بين شيئين فأكثر في خبر واحد وفي وصف واحد وشبه ذلك. التاسع عشر الترصيع، وهو أن تكون الألفاظ في آخر الكلام مستوية الوزن أو متقاربة مع الألفاظ التي في أوله. الموفي 20 التسجيع، وهو أن تكون كلمات الآية على روي حرف واحد. الحادي والعشرون
I mean, these are really impressive words. Epinelepsis and homeoptoton. And these are new for me, so I'll just look them up and have a look how well they correspond. But there's a certain aspect of like having a clear pattern in the wazn of the word, or in the final letter, as we mentioned about tasjih.
الاستطراد، وهو أن تتطرق من كلام إلى كلام آخر بوجه يصل ما بينهما، ويكون الكلام الثاني هو المقصود، كخروج الشاعر من النسيب إلى المدح، بمعنى يتعلق بالطرفين مع أنه إنما قصد المدح.
Okay. So where are the adab students? Where is Amin? Not here. So he's saying that you can move on to a second subject in the Qasida, and you were really, your main topic was the second one, right? The main topic was the following one, but you want to get there with some kind of introductory things that put certain things, images in your mind, and there are some connections between your introductory remarks and your main topic. I'm not sure what he means by an-nasib here. It's not going to be adequacy, right? Maybe to do with something to do with nasab, but I'm not sure. That's why I needed the adab students. And the final one.
الثاني والعشرون المبالغة، وقد تكون بصيغة الكلمة نحو صيغة فعال ومفعال، وقد تكون بالمبالغة في الإخبار أو الوصف، فإن اشتدت المبالغة فهي غلو وإغراق، وذلك مستكره عند أهل هذا الشأن.
Okay, so actually no, they've used the word hyperbole below. The question would be, which of these are considered negative and which are considered acceptable? Because mubalagha is a neutral term, right? It's very similar to the word balagha itself, right? But mubalagha is to kind of to go over and above the basic level, and to express something as bigger or stronger or whatever, right? Than maybe its basic description. And sometimes that is done by the word form, and sometimes it's done in other ways, right? But if you go too far in it, it becomes ghulu, which is excessive, it's extreme, right? So they've described that by hyperbole. Or, and again, some kind of Greek words are coming. It's all Greek. It's all ighriq to me, right? Ighraq is coming in here. See, that's jinas. Did you catch that jinas there? This is quality stuff, right? So this ighraq, adinatun, is ighriq to me. وذلك مستنكرة or مستكره عند أهل هذا الشأن. Now, I don't think that ghulu and ighraq are intended here as two separate terms, right? But he's using two terms for the same thing, right? Let's see what this business is. I will sooner have a beard grow in the palm of my hand than he shall get one on his cheek. Okay. Okay. So, yes, to overdo it is distasteful. That's the point. So I'm inclined to think that hyperbole is more of the accepted word, and exaggeration is more the unaccepted word, but that perhaps needs some more pondering, like lots of other things. النسيب في الشعر الرقيق منه المتغزل به في النساء. Okay, so that explains it then. So what we understand about the qasida, shukran ya Isra, what we understand about the qasida is typically begins with ghazal. You know, this all the crying over the atlal, and then there's the ghazal. And so the soft speech that's going to be used for describing his beloved, etc. And then he moves on to the main topic. So an-nasib here is being used to describe that part of the qasida. طيب بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.